Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Kat Spada, and this is your Fortnightly Freq-out mini episode where I'll run through some brief reviews and industry news. Well, this week I had grand plans to go see The Blue Beetle. Not only did Patreon supporters vote in Discord that this would be a fun one to discuss in the podcast, but I was excited to see a Latin hero and family lead a major studio superhero film. When I saw the trailer for this movie, it looked cute and fun, and if I didn't already have however many years of experience with the DC Extended Universe, I might even have expected it to be exciting. Alas, Hurricane Hillary started to make her way towards me, so I changed the last few days' worth of plans and never made it to the movie theater. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this, I'll have spent those days completely over-preparing for a storm that was less intense than expected. At the time of recording, it's been raining for many hours here, and we also had an earthquake, so that was intense. But I don't yet know how severe this storm will be for my neighbors here in LA and throughout Baja California and the Southwest. So, changing gears, even though I didn't get to the theater this week, of course, I've been catching up on what's streaming, and I have thoughts. And what are you watching? I want to hear more from listeners, so please use hashtag FemFreakRadio, or if you're a Patreon supporter, chime in on Discord. I want to keep the conversation going and hear more from you. First up, a quick note on the World Cup. The Blacklist's Franklin Leonard pointed out on Twitter that in advance of the final between England and Spain, His Royal Highness Prince William, who is the president of the English Football Association, was not planning to attend a World Cup final in which his country's team, the Roses, would be competing. Could you imagine him skipping the Men's World Cup final if England were in the mix? The play forward continues, and there's a great indication of some growing affinity for women's sports on the world stage. Australia, which is one of the Cup's host countries, has seen its national team, the Matildas, increase more than 5-fold in brand value, surpassing the rest of the country's sports teams. Let's hope that all of this means that since viewership, attendance, and revenue all broke records this year, players can become more fairly compensated, have real pitches to play on, secure sponsorship deals, and that as these players on the professional level begin to age out and retire, that they can start taking on more leadership roles for the teams, federations, and maybe even FIFA itself. I'd really love to see that. Also, but before you at me and use the hashtag and all that, apparently there's some rule that King Charles has to go to Australia because it's a part of the Commonwealth before Prince William can or whatever. I think if the men were playing, they would have figured it out. Just going to put that out there. On TV, my attention has been pulled in 100 different directions, and I don't have any new shows really, other than the ones I've brought up in previous Freakouts. We're in the 3rd seasons of Only Murders in the Building, Reservation Dogs, and How To with John Wilson. They're all great. Only Murders has found a clever way to continue its conceit in a somewhat new setting. Reservation Dogs manages to expand beyond genres and tones and makes me laugh, and it breaks my heart with every episode. As for How To with John Wilson, produced by Nathan Fielder, I don't know. It's just my cup of tea. Of course, we have our writers to thank for these stories. So I have a couple of updates about the ongoing Writers Guild strike, which a couple of weeks ago extended beyond the 100-day duration of the 2007 strike. Earlier this month, the trade publication Deadline Hollywood's Strike Talk podcast, which is hosted by screenwriter Billy Ray and film producer Todd Garner, discussed the development of ethical AI. I found it a truly fascinating conversation about the technology at the heart of so many of this summer's labor debates. The link to this episode is in the show notes, and if you've been wondering what the big deal is about AI in regards to Hollywood or the implications beyond, it's a great listen. Also, for comic book fans, Black Mask Studios, an indie comics house, is coming out with a new anthology featuring a labor organizing superhero named General Strike. The stories are written by striking WGA writers, and sales will benefit the Entertainment Community Fund and people affected by the work stoppage. If this is something you'd want to support, find the Kickstarter linked in our show notes and sign up to be notified when the anthology is for sale. Finally, I was really excited to see that the documentary Every Body is streaming and available now on Peacock. From director Julie Cohen, it's a portrait of 3 intersex activists as the fight for trans people's bodily autonomy intersects with intersex human rights issues. As a film, it has a lot to tackle. Understandably, with the dearth of representation of intersex people's stories, Every Body wants to tell us about the history of intersex medical treatment, these 3 subjects' personal journeys, and touch base with the landscape of sex-based discrimination in our country currently. Those are a lot of plates to spin. But I highly recommend watching this movie. Intersex identity has been kept so secret over the years in our culture, and learning more about it from intersex people is the most important thing to begin to affect change and end the violence against intersex bodies. I will note that a major subject discussed is non-consensual, inessential medical and surgical procedures performed on minors. Some of those conversations are very, very hard to watch. There's the story of a patient named David Reimer, whose treatment by the medical authority is tantamount to lifelong torture. It's absolutely gutting. Honestly, there was a moment where I wasn't sure if I could keep watching. And it's not because of graphic scenes or imagery, just because of the pain that this man and so many others have endured. This may be especially hard to watch for people who've experienced a traumatically imposed gendered upbringing. But I think the I in LGBTQIA is so often overlooked. And that's why I want to close on another sequence in this film that made me cry, but for all the right reasons. There's footage from the first organized gathering of intersex activists in 1996. It's about a dozen people sitting on a picnic blanket in a backyard somewhere, just sharing their stories with each other. That these brave, beautiful people had the foresight to record themselves, talking about what their identities and experiences have been and meant. It's just the start. I'm like emotional just recounting it. It's the start of a movement that's still growing, of intersex people claiming the narrative of what their existence alone means, instead of the dominant story being told in medical journals by doctors who are viciously tethered to the gender and sex binary. It's a breathtaking sequence. On that, this rain is getting pretty heavy, so I'm going to pack it in now. This has been your Fortnightly Freak-out from me, Kat Spada. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads at @Kat_EX_Machina, as is Feminist Frequency at FemFreak, and also on Instagram and Facebook. I'll admit I'm still using Twitter probably the most. Not going to call it X. I've just decided. Please tune in next week for a full-length episode of Feminist Frequency Radio. I'll see you then.